All right. Hello, everyone. Wake up. What is it? This is the session. No, it's not even the session after morning tea. Another one to go. How's TechEd going? Good? Learning stuff? Windows 8? Do we like Windows 8? Yeah, okay. Yes. So, why are we here today? So, I'm doing a session on group policy, how to use group policy to the maximum benefit in your organisation. Although if you RFID'd in, it would say how to use group policy to the maximum benefit of your organ. I didn't plan that, but just be aware when you RFID in, it's like you're learning about your organ. No, so everyone here, hands up. You got group policy in your organisation, don't you? Who thinks their group policy in their organisation is perfect? Yeah, no one. Well, it's kind of like one of those things where group policy, you know, there is no best practice. I was kind of asked, can you do a best practice session? And I said, sure, but there's no such thing as best practices. So, I'm Alan Birchall, by the way. In case you're wondering who I was, I see a lot more faces here than yesterday. So I am a senior consultant with Avanade. I am based in Australia. If you can't tell, I say fish and chips and the number 6. So I'm Brisbane based. I flew across the ditch to come here. It's excellent to be here and presenting. I love TechEd New Zealand. It's got a great feel compared to Australia. Australia is this big convention centre. It's very sterile. Here it's nice and homely feeling and cold and wet, but that's okay. I don't mind. We stay inside. We get to keep warm. Drink lots of coffee. So I'm also the author of a website, the Group Policy Central. I'm going to plug this how many times I don't know, but if someone wants to keep count, that'd be great. It's grouppolicy.biz. So that's one. So every time I say grouppolicy.biz, 2, you'll get it through your head that this is a great website. Why am I promoting it though? It's where along my IT career, if I learn something about group policy, I'll blog about it. The number of times I've gone to do a search on Google something on Bing and then find my own website has the article of what I needed to do, and it's like, oh, I wrote that 3 years ago, of course. It's like, it's just the repository of things that I do and have learned across the ages. And so hopefully you can also benefit from that. It's basically has a whole heap of blog posts in there that is what I'm going to talk about today. All right, so if you go, oh, he talked about that, what was that again? Sessions are being recorded, excellent. I'm going to go into some depth about it, but I go into a lot more depth in my blog posts, better screenshots, how-tos, next, finish. The thing I don't like about TechNet is they don't have many screenshots, right? It's just do this, next, finish, and you go, hang on, when was that again? My website, I like screenshots because, you know, screenshots, you can go, oh, that's the button I click on or something like that. So that's how I try to do my blog posts on my website. But that's my website. So today I should begin with, I mentioned it kind of before, your mileage may vary. Right, I'm going to say do things this way, and you might go, well, that doesn't work for me because our organisation's not set up that way. Unfortunately, every organisation in the world is not set up the same way. Some are a single organisational structure with one location. Some are single organisational structure with lots of locations. Some have lots of locations and lots of organisations. It really depends on how you've got to think about how you manage. What's your scope of responsibility for managing your environment? And this dictates a lot of how you're going to design and manage and implement changes in your organisation. Right? If you have a central CIO that controls everything, you've got a central team, you might actually want to start thinking about, well, how am I going to manage group policy based on the management lines, right? To make delegation of permissions and things like that easier. All right? What I'm telling you to do, right? It can be dangerous. Like, you know, group policy, you can set one group policy object and destroy every computer in your organisation if you're not careful. You know, who wants to do that? Career limiting move? Absolutely. So what do? You have to test, you know. Great thing about Windows 8. This is for me personally, the thing I love about Windows 8 the most is Hyper-V on a laptop. Alright? Alright, 64-bit support, Hyper-V, I can sleep my laptop, no problems. I've got like 10 VMs going, I've got 6 domain controllers. It's fantastic. So if you get Windows 8 on your machine at work, there's your play test environment. Alright, and it's free. It comes with Windows 8, well Pro, pretty sure it comes with Pro. No, it definitely comes with Enterprise. It must come with Pro. Alright, so use Hyper-V, leverage your TechEd MSDM subscription, download that, start playing, testing, alright? Hopefully you also have, though, a proper, isolated test environment. It's okay if you don't, alright? I've certainly worked in fairly large organisations that didn't have that. You can maybe do other things, alright? But test, and test some more before you start rolling into production. And then when you start rolling into production, make sure you have kind of a rollback strategy. So this is also correct. So I may say some things, again, because we're not all the same organisation, that may be wrong for you. Please don't be offended. Please don't say he doesn't know what he's talking about. That doesn't apply to me. Because it doesn't apply to you, I'll say, yes, some of this stuff won't. But some of it will. And so what I'm hoping is to give you lots of golden nuggets along the way that you'll pick up some, and others you might go, well, okay, that might confirm what we're doing is great. All right, but hang on, that's a great idea. Maybe we should do it that way. All right. So basically, I've got a whole range of topics that I'm going to cover. And I hope along the way you'll get some benefit out of it, but it might not be everything is to your liking. And like I said before, there's no such thing as best practice. Again, mainly because you're not all the same. You're not all the same organisation. All right? But I'm going to use that term. It might be interchangeable with good practice, best practice, but just don't say that we have to do it this way because Alan at TechEd said this is the way to do it and it's the best practice, so there can't be any better way to do it. That's not quite true. It's like it has to be for you and it has to be right for your organisation. Alrighty. This is the first thing that I say to everyone. It's really great to do. Get a central management server, and this is not just about group policy. I say this generally. If you've got an organisation where you've got more than one IT administrator, even if you just have one IT administrator, spin up a server running Server 2012, enable remote desktop services on it, and install all your management tools on there. All right, make it the latest and greatest. All your IT admins can connect to there. When you have a system upgrade of a certain component, there is one spot where you can update the administrator tools. If it's a third-party product and you have administrator tools for that third-party product, you just update it there. You don't have to then worry about the 20 other administrators that have it installed on their local machine. Not that they should be running as administrator on their local machine, which is the other reason why you wouldn't want to do that. Okay, but this gives you the opportunity to connect to a remote desktop session using their administrator credentials. And of course, everyone has their own dedicated administrator account, don't they? Don't put your hand up if you don't, because that's just embarrassing. If your standard user account has local admin access, that's just a world of hurt. But I know we all do it somewhere in the world. It's still getting done, so it's okay. You're not the only one. But create a central management server. Why? Because the group policy management console is the tool you use to manage group policy. All right? And you should always use the latest and greatest version of Group Policy Management Console on your server, in your environment, because it has all the new features. It understands the latest version settings that you're trying to apply to your organisation, and it understands the lowest versions. Right? If you start editing Group Policy with XP, it'll kind of know only about the XP stuff. If you start editing with Windows 7, it'll only know about the Windows 7 stuff. All right? That doesn't mean you can log on to your domain controllers and use that as your management server. All right? Logging on to your DC. We should all take a pledge here that we shall never log on and manage our environment from our domain controllers. Okay? Logging on and doing stuff on your DCs is bad. You don't want to affect the stability of your domain controllers. The best way to do that is to do something on it, and you go accidentally shut the server down because you think you're on a workstation. Or classic one I've seen is someone goes, oh, my machine's got Windows updates, I need to install them and reboot. It's like, no, you're on a server. Especially if you're running a seamless application in Citrix, and then the Windows Update pop-up comes and comes in your system tray, but because you're logged on to Citrix as a local administrator, you get the notification about those Windows updates, and I click the Windows Update thing and I go install those updates, where in fact what I'm doing is installing the updates on the server. Yeah, that's another really good reason not to be running your standard user account as a local admin, or just being really careful about how things are configured in your environment. But domain controllers are bad. Stay off them. Keep them clean. Don't install anything on them. Run as the limited GUI functionality in Windows Server 2012. That's a great way to force you to not do stuff on those servers, stuff like that. And I mentioned it before, always use the latest and greatest version of the Group Policy Management Console. So Server 2012 RTM's out. That has the latest and greatest version of the Group Policy Management Console installed. I'm still looking for the latest version of the Remote Server Admin tools. They're not out yet. They should be out really soon. You need the Remote Server Admin tools to install on a Windows 8 workstation. All right, to have Group Policy Management Console. I just said, don't do that. Don't run group policy on your workstation. Yeah, fair enough. But if you're going to install them, make sure they're the latest and greatest. Sometimes you might just want to look as a standard user and not do any edits because you're not running as a local administrator. Group policy objects. Use a naming convention. Naming conventions the great thing about naming conventions for group policy objects is that they allow you to understand where the group policy objects are being applied to machines when you're troubleshooting. If you just have a group policy object applied to your machine and it says, you know, Adobe, it's like, oh, I've got a policy applied, it's called Adobe. You've got to figure out where that's applied, right? If you put some intuitiveness in there, to say, you know, this is workstations, laptops, side A, Adobe settings, or program settings, Adobe. It kind of gives you a little bit more of a breadcrumb to follow to say, well, where is that group policy object linked? Yes, you can go to the group policy object and figure that out, right, where it's linked. But sometimes a naming convention just helps you just a little bit more if you can more intuitively understand how that group policy object's applied in your environment. Also try to avoid, I hate this, using the word policy or GPO in the group policy object name. I know it's a group policy object. I'm looking at a group policy object. You don't need to say it's a policy. It's like saying, you know, it's an ATM machine or something like, you know, PIN number and stuff like that. It's redundant information, and you don't need to have an extremely long group policy name in your environment. They can get quite long, and maybe abbreviation is one way you can get around that. You know, WKS or WS for workstation, LP for laptop, or you know, DK or DS for desktop or something like that. You can abbreviate, but there's no need to put more information in there than you need. All right, treat your terminal servers like workstations mostly, and it's remote desktop services, but we all know what a terminal server is, and if I say terminal server, you know and understand what I mean. So, terminal servers are just workstations with multiple personalities, right? You've just got multiple users logging onto them all the time, okay? So, this is where it gets really complicated, because sometimes you have a server support team, sometimes you have a workstation support team, all right? And they don't like each other. Alright, but terminal servers are kind of this crossover between, it's a server operating system, sure, but the users and the workstations use it. If I had my choice, I would say your workstation administrator should manage your terminal servers, certainly the environment on your terminal servers. The reason being is because you want to keep your terminal servers, generally speaking, in sync with your workstations, because you want a consistent work environment from your workstation to your terminal servers, because you're trying to trick the user into thinking that they're just on the machine that's sitting on their desk, right? It's hard to do if you've got like a 2003 R2 terminal server and you're running Windows 7 on the desktop. Sure, you know, you might want to do that for legacy applications. There's not a lot you can do about that. But if you're running like-for-like OS versions, you want to try to keep them in sync. All right? So I like to say prefer to use workstations unless you've got one team and it's integrated between servers and workstations and they all love each other and, you know, go out for coffees and everything all the time, then maybe you could say, well, the server guys can support it. But you also have to patch, and this is slightly different, but I always say you have to patch your terminal servers like workstations as well. All right, just because it's a server running a server operating system doesn't mean you can only patch it every few months. All right, you have to patch it as aggressively as you patch a workstation because there's these things called users that use them, right? And that's why, because they do silly things from time to time. It's like, oh, but I thought I was going to win money. Someone said I won. Yeah, no, you didn't. Only configure settings you need to set. Back in the days of Windows 2000, there was this new thing called group policy, and every administrator went through and went, oh, I've got thousands of settings I can control on my users. I'm going to enable or disable every single one of them. It's going to be great. It was great, but it was really hard to manage when you have so many settings to apply to a machine. Now, I'm not saying those settings might have necessarily caused your environment to slow down. Settings, especially administrator template settings, are really quick to apply. But it's kind of like a rubber ball that is made up of rubber bands. You've got one little rubber band in the middle and you put another rubber band around it and put another rubber band around it and put another rubber band around it, and soon you get a very big ball of rubber bands. These are settings, right? And then you go to a new operating system, Windows 7. Who's going through a Windows XP to Windows 7 migration at the moment? Lots of you, all right? If you're at that point where you can make that decision now, I strongly encourage you to say this is the time where you get that rubber ball and get a knife and you cut right through it, right down to the core, and only keep the settings you need. All right? How do you get around that? Don't give the users local admin access. They can't do much damage if they're not local administrators, right? Yeah, they can see the control panel. They can't really do much damage because they're not local admins, okay? So, I'm saying there's a real trend at the moment is just use the out-of-the-box settings of Windows 7. Don't customize the UI. Maybe customize the wallpaper and screensaver and stuff like that, but that's about it. Okay? Because a lot of people have Windows 7 at home, and if it's the same at home as it is at work, the training is less because it doesn't look different. All right? And guess what? A lot of people at home are going to get Windows 8 machines soon. How do you think Microsoft's going to get that foot in the enterprise door? If I have a Windows 8 machine at home and it looks the same as my Windows 8 machine at work, I'm used to my one at home. I want to use my one at work now on a tablet touch device. Less training involved, right? That's why I think personally, I don't work for Microsoft, so I can't say officially, but personally why I think they're trying to get Windows 8 into the consumer mind more. It's still a great enterprise product. Hey, it's got Hyper-V there. You know, it's got great group policy features that have been added in there, like the ability to push out group policy updates to all the machines in an OU within 10 minutes. If you were in my session yesterday, you might have seen that happen. But I think what they're trying to do is get it into the mindset of consumers first. So, what's a group policy setting, possibly a logon script setting, that is, and yell it out, that gets updated frequently? Like the user, the people in your organization, it's something that you get requests, oh, I have to make another change, so people get that setting. Sorry? Close. Printers. Right? Printers change a lot, don't they? Drive mappings do change a lot as well. Alright? So, when you change a group policy object, right, there's no smarts about what's changed in that group policy object. It's just going to say, hey, that's a new group policy object. I'm going to refresh all those settings in that group policy object. Alright? When you apply it to a machine. So, if you're changing that group policy object on a frequent schedule, you're continually doing like a GP update force for that group policy object and all the settings in that. So if you have one group policy object that has a lot of settings and you have one group policy object that has a few settings, but those few settings change frequently, you're only changing the delta. Now, I'm not saying there's a problem with a lot of settings, but it's just like a death of 1,000 paper cuts. If you can just trim that off a little bit more by saying, well, I'm just making changes. If you make a change to a group policy object and has security or file permissions set to it, it's going to re-permission. It's going to trigger that permission to be re-permissioned, right? Because it doesn't know what's changed in the group policy object. And hey, I've got this C:* permission set. I'm going to just do it all again because, hey, this group policy object changed. All right? Security baseline templates, stuff like that do that sort of stuff. All right? So it's an idea. It might not apply to your environment, but consider creating a separate GPO for settings like the drive mappings, preference mappings, things that change often. All right. It's also good if you make a mistake. Maybe it's easy to roll back because you're not rolling back all the settings. You're only rolling back one group policy object. I might go into that in a minute. And look, I've talked about it as well. More settings though. I mean, I know in the second item there I said only settings you need to set, but more settings don't equal a slower SOE. Bad settings equal a slower SOE, like the file system repermissioning, like the registry key permissioning, definitely like folder redirection, all right, especially the first time you log on. But administrator template settings, group policy preferences, generally the number of settings is not what's going to impact, it's what you're doing. All right, and some of the new features in Windows 8, which I demoed in the last session, which is yesterday, which is recorded, so you can go back and see it, is group policy reports now will actually give you a breakdown of each component, folder redirection, group policy core infrastructure, registry key settings, admin templates, and how many milliseconds it took to apply those settings. So if your folder redirection is at 30 seconds and your admin templates is at 200 milliseconds, you know your problem's not with the number of settings you're applying, it's just with your folder redirection, or vice versa. All right. Here's another tip. If you do have file security permissions applied to your environment, right, you think, great, it's applied. It took a while to apply those permissions because I had a huge folder structure. I'm not going to do it again. Wrong. Security settings automatically get applied every 18 hours, even if they're already set. All right? So keep that in mind as well. Okay, so those security settings, whether or not they're set or not, will get reapplied every 18 hours, just to be sure that they haven't changed in the background and it hasn't detected that change. Disabling the user and computer settings if not in use. I've seen a lot of people say this. I'm kind of like, yeah, but then the day comes where you want to put a user setting maybe as a loopback, or you want to put a computer in that policy setting and it doesn't work, and you spend the next 2 hours going, why the heck doesn't this work? I don't know. There's no real benefit in disabling it other than it's kind of like the safety switch on a gun, right? That's good, but don't do it because you think it's going to improve performance. All right? So if you just want to disable that component because you want to be absolutely sure that no one's going to go in and add another setting in there and then start applying loopback user settings to your machines, fine. If you're disabling it because you think you're going to get more performance out of it, no. That's the last thing you look at for more performance out of it, because it's not applying any settings. It just goes, well, I'm going to evaluate this. First step is it enabled? Yes. Next step is, does it have any settings? No. Then keep going on. Doesn't take long for that to figure it out. Okay. Avoid using enforced policies. It's like the big hammer approach. All right. If you put an enforced policy there, unless there's another enforced policy there, which is kind of like doing I have the object that can move anything, and I have the object that can't move anything, can't be moved. It's kind of like that battle, but you know, it's just the closest one wins. There is actually a winner when you have two enforced policies. It's the one that's applied, has the highest precedent. But you kind of like just step in an upper level, and if you're using enforced to override enforced, it gets really complicated really fast, and you've just added another layer of complexity in your environment to do troubleshooting. You say, why the heck am I getting that setting? But I will say security templates are probably the one time you want to do that. Have dedicated group policy objects that are just for your security settings. All right, because they're the settings you don't want anyone to override. All right, whether it be someone applying a setting down lower at the organisational unit or anything like that. It's just, you know, there's some good security templates out there, which I'll show you in soon, that you can apply, customize them to your own environment, and then you set them and you go, well, I've got a secure environment, but now I'm going to worry about the user, the look and feel of the environment. Okay. create new group policy objects only when the scope is different. Now, I had another one that said only create different group policy objects when you have lots of things to change. Yes, well, group policy is a multi-dimensional beast. You kind of got to figure out which one's the best. But if you already have a group policy object that applies settings to your workstations, and let's say that you've got a workstation security template, but maybe you also just have a workstations policy for general settings that aren't security related, don't create another workstation group policy object that applies to exactly the same scope. Just edit that one. You know, if it's not frequent, it's just a static change, that's fine. Alright? Don't proliferate group policy objects. Alright? Who has over 1,000 group policy objects in their organisation? Hands up. No one has over 1,000 group policy objects in your organisation. Well, that's really good. Nothing wrong with having 1,000 group policy objects in your organisation from a group policy point of view. Your Active Directory administrators might wig out. Alright? If you're not an Active Directory administrator as well. Alright, but yeah, try to reuse those group policy objects, use the naming convention when possible. And I've already had that one in there. I swear I've deleted that one so many times. And only configure settings you need to set. It's so important, that one, so I'll put it in there twice. What? Ah, what? Anyway, I had some major failure there. Alright, 80-20 rule. This is how generally group policy settings go in your organisation. I told you have a big general workstation group policy object. I also say try to keep your user group policy objects and your workstation group policy objects separate. Alright? It's just a pain when you have all your users and your workstations being controlled by one group policy object. Alright, because you're changing something that's changing user accounts, you're changing something that's changing computer accounts, you're making a change to a user, but it's also affecting the computer. It's still kind of the same if you have lots of group policy objects, but if you separate them, the manageability becomes a lot easier. Smaller chunks of the pie to manage. But I usually say 80-20 rule, 90-10 rule, even 95-5 rule. Have all those workstations, resources, that's desktops, laptops, maybe servers. You use group policy to manage servers. That's why I call them resources. Managed, well, users are a resource too, I suppose. With your general settings. So you have these are my settings that I've defined that all the users in my organisation will have. When I break it down to an organisation, let's say maybe I have multiple organisations or multiple business units if I'm a very big company within my organisation. Make the organisation specific settings apply only to those organisations. Don't have, if you have 10 different business units in one huge organisation or something like that, don't have the same settings repeated 10 times. Because when that setting needs to change, you have to go through and change those settings 10 times. Alright? Have the settings apply from a central location. It makes the rollback a little bit easier too, but yes, it also increases the risks of the fact that I have one group policy object applied to all my machines. So you want to tightly control those group policy objects. Alright, but you can also do that sort of thing. It's like, okay, I've got resources, I've got my organisation, but then I have my sites. You know, really good site-specific settings, printers. Right? Printers are physically located in a location. I want to target my printers for that location. Maybe I have a separate group policy object that is specific to that location. So I'll kind of just switch and just kind of show you. I hope that's big enough. If I do it any smaller, that's pretty much the minimum resolution you can really present. Alright, so this is kind of what I'm talking about. Here. I'm blind! No, I'm not. Oh, it's this end. Woohoo. Laser pointer. So here we've got our organisation, and then we've got our site, and then I've broken it down to resource here. Notice I've got one group policy object here called Contoso users. I'm using a naming convention here. It's like Contoso is my top level organisation name, which means that if I'm going in and I'm looking at my all group policy objects, I might have a heap of group policy objects in there and it's really hard, but hey, all my Contoso group policy objects are clumped together. Makes them a bit easier to find. Where if I just call in these things like hide mouse pointer options, they're all kind of all jumbled and over the place. All right. But if I have a look over here too, I've linked the same group policy object, Contoso users. This is my 80% policy, right? Contoso users. 80% of my settings are applied there. Right? And then Auckland users, they're my 20%. Right? And I might break it down underneath that. Maybe I have branch or suburb or some other building. Good one. Right? And you can break it down even further than that. But the Auckland users only applies. I could use a mouse pointer, hey? Might be easier. So the Auckland users only applies in one location, but the Contoso users is in lots of places. Here I'm going a bit multi-dimensional, where I've got Contoso desktops. Right, I've got workstations and I'll break it down to desktops and laptops. I even have kiosk machines. How am I going to treat these machines differently? If I'm going to treat these machines differently, then that's a good reason to break it out in OUs. I don't like people going, I need to create an organisational unit to apply a different screensaver policy to a couple of users. Okay? Because you start proliferating a lot of organisational unit OUs very quickly if you start going down that path. If you start going down to those exceptional cases where the 1s and 2% of the time, I like to start creating groups and security filtering and applying them up at the base level here like workstations consistently, all right, and then link them across multiple workstations. If you don't think that that screensaver policy needs to be applied outside of, say, Contoso, Auckland workstations, call it Contoso screensavers, right? Right. But if I'm going to apply it across multiple sites, get rid of the Auckland, right? And then start linking it. These are just ideas of the way you can link it together and make it a little bit easier to understand. Okay. I love this. Star Wars, you know how in Star Wars they do wipes? Star Wars wipe. That's what I like. We got cut as well, that's boring. And we got, ooh, fade. Okay. Ooh. Alright. Security baseline GPOs. Right. There is an awesome tool that Microsoft has. Write that URL down, microsoft.com/SCM. Awesome tool. Phenomenal. I don't know how everyone hasn't used this. Alright. It's a standalone product which is free. You can install it on any machine. Remember the days of Windows Server 2003, I think, and even 2000? And you kind of had these, I think, with our INF baseline security templates that came with the operating system. One was Secure Sec and one was called SSLF, or Secure Function Limited Functionality, or the other one was Standard. The problem was they came with the operating system and they never got updated. And of course, security settings in 2003 have never been revised since then because security was perfect back then and there's never been anything that changed since then. Obviously not. So Microsoft has this tool now which brings together the guidance for virtually every, well, not all their products, certainly all their operating system products, server, Exchange is in there, IE9, even XP. Is Exchange there? It should be there. Maybe I haven't downloaded it. Is it? It's probably there somewhere. Oh yeah, Exchange Server, there it is. Right, and it gives you the security guidance on how to configure your environment. Right, and it even has attachments and guidelines. So it actually has Word documents embedded in it. Right, that gives you the guidelines of. Basically, Microsoft have gone out to a number of customers, looked at a heap of guidance of how they configure their environment, and they've just gone, right, well, what settings work for you? Minimum password, 8 characters. What settings works for you? Minimum password, 10 characters. Right. Lowest common denominator, well, if we set it to 10 characters, do you care? No, we don't care. 10 characters is fine. But we have to have at least 8. Well, 10's better than 8, so we might pick 10. But that's kind of what they've done. They've gone out to the community, looked at all the government organisations, and looked at, well, how can we apply policy settings? So how is it presented? So these are admin group policy settings, right? And it's details about them. So Windows 7 BitLocker, enterprise configuration, how should you configure it? All right? Microsoft says, disable this. All right? What's the default? Not configured. All right? So you can, out of the box, see that, okay, there's some things here. This is always an interesting one. If you've got BitLocker enabled, Microsoft recommends, and this is the recommended guidance, you can take this as from Microsoft, because this is from Microsoft, that you don't enable sleep if you've got BitLocker enabled on, certainly not your Windows 7 machines. But why? That sounds strange. I like my users being able to open the lid and it instantly starts. That's great. And I've got my drive BitLocker encrypted. But then I can go to the detail settings. All right, you don't get this in the group policy when you go more information about it. All right? Vulnerability. A computer which is asleep may keep power to the RAM, may contain secrets such as the BitLocker volume key. And if you have access to the memory, in other words, if you can launch it via, I think, the FireWire port, you can actually then turn the machine on and get access to the memory doing an attack via the FireWire port or IEEE port or whatever, and get the BitLocker recovery key. Potential impact. Right? It recommends you disable it. What's the impact? It's going to take longer for the machine to start up. Countermeasure, that's basically what are we doing? Put the machine to hibernate so it powers off so that secret is no longer in RAM when the machine is turned off. Right? For every one of the settings in here, it has something about it and why, and it gives you the rationalization. Alright? So if your manager goes to you, we need to apply a security policy to your organisation. Okay, I think these are good ideas, I'll apply this. You can say, here it is, this is a good idea. And then you go, oh, I need a report. I need to have that in some sort of way that I can present it to my manager. Okay, well, you can actually export that as an Excel spreadsheet. All right? Notice also I can export it as a group policy backup. So I can export it out of this tool as a group policy backup, as a folder, and then I can restore it as a group policy object. All right? It also supports SCCM desired configuration management packs. Alright, SCM cab file, so if I take this from one machine that has a security compliance manager installed, I can go to another machine that has security compliance manager installed. Alright, but I can also customize it, because maybe this setting sucks and I really don't care if someone wants to do a direct memory attack to a workstation laptop, because it's just, there's nothing too special about my machine. I just like to have it encrypted, so, you know, it's just for general guidance and it's really easy to do BitLocker. So maybe I go, well, I don't really want to have a security template. Come on, respond. What did I do? Yeah. Don't look at that. Look way over there. Okay, I can duplicate a template. All right. So I make my own template based off the guidance, and I can modify the settings in there. Alright? If I have my own work documents around that guidance, just, you know, why aren't we using this setting, I can also add that into this attachments and guidelines. Alright? I can add a file into here, alright, add an attachment, but then I can go in here and, well, no, I want this enabled. Alright, configured, enabled. I can put a comment is because hibernate sucks. Alright. And now I've just customized my own template, right? I can save that as a cab file, export it off. I can then go, right, and I've exported that as a backup. I can also take a backup of a group policy object and import it into this tool. Great way to compare my security templates I currently have in my environment against the Microsoft Best Practices Guideline. Alright, so here, where is it? I always look at the, lose this, import group policy backup. Alright, so take a backup. But then I can also compare. So I made a change there. I go compare. Well, which one do I want to compare with? Well, obviously I want to compare with the one I just exported from. But remember, I changed something. Two settings are different. All right. Settings that match. These all match. Great. So if I'm a security manager in my environment and I say, oh, I've got this cab file here, this has the master list and nothing should have changed from this list, can you do an export of the group policy object for me or a backup of it? I'm going to take that backup, I'm going to compare it with what it should be every 6 months. And then it's going to give me this kind of exceptions report. What's changed? Why has this changed? Where was the change control for this change? I need to know so I can update the master baseline. Great tool. All right, the good thing about it too, really great thing about it too, is that it has an update functionality. So if Microsoft releases new guidelines, it will download and update new guidelines. If it updates new guidelines about Exchange, or maybe there's this new product called Windows 8 coming out soon, guidelines should come out. Can sometimes take a few weeks, can sometimes take a few months, because it's a new product and they have to get all that goodness back and package it back and format it in a way. But great tool, free. Go download it and make your, just find out how bad the security is in your environment. Star Wars White, 40 minutes, excellent. WSUS, who has WSUS in their environment for patching? Awesome. Sorry if you're using SCCM, this is this part that doesn't apply to you. All right. Great thing about WSUS I love is the integration with group policy. All right. You can go and apply registry keys manually to every machine via SneakerNet if you want to, but group policy is the far more efficient way to configure that. This is some guidance around how you can leverage group policy to manage your WSUS environment. Okay? I love to apply a group policy setting at the top level of my domain, right at the top. All right? And it says, this is my default WSUS server. All right? And I set it to option 2, which is detect and do not download or do anything. Why? Because that is a net I can cast over my entire fleet of computers to get them to all report into at least one WSUS server, so I can at least get visibility of the patch status of every machine that's connected to my domain. All right? Pretty useful information to know. It's nice to know your patch status of all your workstations, but how many machines are in your computer's container? What's the patch status of your domain controllers? What's the patch status of your Exchange servers, your terminal servers, all that? If you're starting out, put that default there. It's kind of like your default catch-all bucket, so you don't get any of those fall through the cracks. Notice I put a no change policy. So I'm not saying don't configure it to then automatically download and notify or automatically download and install patches, because all of a sudden every one of your machines will start downloading patches and your WAN links go absolutely berserk. Just do it to detect, all right? Basically enabling some simple reporting, all right? Apply policies at lower levels, but only settings that you need. What do I mean by that? All right. I don't know if I had time to go in. So what I basically mean by that is you have your default policy here, WSUS default. All right. This one here sets the server. I had a major failure of my Active Directory environment about half an hour before doing this session, so I've lost a lot of my configuration. But that's okay. So you want to specify an intranet location, so we call that HTTP WSUS master. Alright. And we've configured this one here, option 2, notify and notify for install. Alright. So I've done that at the top level, but then on my workstations, alright, I've got a policy here. Well, all my workstations I want to patch every day at 3 AM in the standard interval. So I've already got a default server. Maybe that's the close server, the WSUS master server. So all I need to do here is change one setting, which is configure the automatic updates, and configure this to option 4, auto download and schedule the install every day at 3 AM. Alright? And then for Workstations Brisbane, because this is specific, this is my 1%, this is specific, I want to put my target group down here at this level. Alright? because it's just for Brisbane workstations. All right, so what I'm doing is there's a number of group policy objects that you need for WSUS, and I'm just layering them together. All right, because, you know, all right, of course, WSUS target groups need to be unique as well. All right. So again, I like to also keep the naming conventions of my client-side targeting in WSUS for those target groups to be pretty close to the group policy object names. Why? Because it kind of leaves me that breadcrumb trail back. Right, if a machine's reporting into WSUS and it's in the Brisbane workstations Brisbane target group, then it's probably from getting that policy setting, getting that targeting setting from the Brisbane workstation group policy object. All right, so you start layering it together. All right, and then maybe you have a servers OU. All right, so I've got Brisbane, new organisational unit servers. All right, but here I create a group policy object. Contoso servers. And then here, of course, I don't want to automatically start pushing out patches to my servers. But remember, I'm not going to do that anyway, because at the top level I've got it set to number 2, so it's already safe. But maybe on my servers, what I want to do is, well, I don't want to automatically install the patches, but I want the patches to at least be there, ready, downloaded, ready to install. All right, because it might need to trickle down over a WAN link over a few hours or maybe a couple of days. So auto download and notify for install. So when I log onto the server, I'll be notified, hey, there's still patches that need to be applied to this machine. So layer them together. That's how I do it. Obviously, there's the one option that people sometimes don't realise is that there's a targeting option in the WSUS server that says use group policy targeting, not manual allocation, manual targeting. So basically, if you have it to manual, when the machine reports in, it ignores that target group and you have to drag that machine into the correct group. That's really slow and hard to do when you have many computers. Using WSUS or group policy to do those target groups helps that, so make sure that's turned on, otherwise none of this will work. All right, that's another thing. All right. So you also notice what I did before with that default WSUS policy. I didn't edit the default domain policy. All right. Default domain policy, another thing we should all just never ever do, never ever ever edit your default domain policy, right? It's not meant to be domain. These are quotes from TechEd, all right? If you don't believe me, that's official from TechEd pages, all right? In general, do not modify the default domain controller. That's domain controller, that's another default policy. All right, and do not modify the default domain controller policy or the default domain controller, whatever, unless necessary. You get the point. There's one exception: password and lockout settings. All right, that's where you have to, because that's the only place you can apply password and lockout settings, unless you have a password settings object and you want to do that granular password settings. But that's based on security group, not a group policy object. Okay, but your default password settings can only be set at a domain level, generally speaking. All right. Create a new group policy object. It's going to blat your entire domain. If something goes wrong, you want to be able to granularly just quickly turn that policy off and disable it if something goes wrong, but still have your default domain policy settings applied. All right, because they're your key critical security settings that you want applied everywhere. All right, give you some flexibility there. You don't want that policy to be updated too frequently, that's for sure. All right, back up often. You can also back up with PowerShell. Let me show you. All right, so there's a great article there. It's in the slide deck. The slide deck will get updated. It's been out for a while, but there's a great PowerShell script that's been written that says back up all the group policy objects in my environment that have changed in the last month, or have changed this month. All right, run that on a scheduled basis, right? And it's a great way to keep track of all the group policy objects. Backing up your AD, right, doesn't mean you've got a good backup of your group policy object. All right, because it's very difficult to restore a group policy object when you've got a backup of your Active Directory. All right, you want to back up the Active Directory group policy objects themselves in a format that makes it very easy to granularly restore that. Okay, so how do we do that? So, go to that article. Here's the article here. All right, copy the text out. Really simple. Best practice, good practice, shouldn't say best, is to sign it, right? But I've had to enable set execution policy unsigned to run this script. And then basically it is, and it's just going off and it's just backing up all the group policy objects, boom. 16 group policy objects were successfully backed up. So what's that doing is that it's backing up the group policy objects that changed this month. Alright, so it hasn't gone back and backed up other group policy objects. What if I want to back up all my group policy objects? Well, via the UI, it's really easy. You just right click here and go back up all. Alright, get your baseline like that. Really simple. Alright, but if you then have a look at the folder, it's saved it to C drive. Group policy backup object. So I've got a group policy backup. There's the name. If I go into there, got all the information there that's required to back that up. But it also does a GP report. All right. So I've now got a HTML report of every setting that was in those policy objects that I backed up. Great way, if you don't have something that I'm going to talk about in a minute, to basically say something's changed and I've got no record of what it was. Alright, because when you make a change to the group policy object, it doesn't keep a history of it, it just replicates it out and that's the new group policy object. So hopefully, there he is. So it does a HTML report of every group policy object as it backs it up as well. So I have something to go back to and compare to. Pretty handy. And if you just schedule that as a task to keep running, that's a great way to know in the back of your mind that at least I've got something to roll back to and something to refer back to at a point in time when that group policy, what the previous setting was. Alright? Just free ways to kind of, keep track of it. Alright? And if you want the PowerShell command to do a backup, just of an individual machine, backup GPO, test, and then the path. Oh. I don't think the folder exists. What did I do wrong there? There is a C drive. Oh, dash path. Oh, I don't have a group policy object called test. Fix that easy. How do I not have a group policy object called test? Done. And if I have a look at my desktop, hopefully there's something there. Oh no, it's not even my desktop, is it? C:users administrator, and there it is there. I've just saved it to the wrong spot. And that's why you should test all the time, because you don't want something to go wrong. Alright, I reckon I've got about 5 minutes more. Nod, 5 minutes more. Alright, cool. Let me quickly go through a few other things. Alright. Verbose status messages. Who here is in this building is staying in this building? No? Alright, I can tell you, anyway, the lifts in this building are so slow. You press the button, you wait, and you wait, and you wait. A friend of mine was a psychologist. I'm going to get back to why this is important. And she said that there was a building that wanted to add a new elevator shaft to their building because the elevators were so slow and people were complaining all the time about why the elevators you had to wait so long for them. And a psychologist suggested, why don't you put a mirror next to the elevators, right? And they're like, why the heck would you do that? Because when people are standing there waiting for the elevator, they're going to be standing there, and they're going to be looking in the mirror, and they're going to be doing this. They're going to be doing that. How do I look? I look pretty good. Yeah, okay. Not too bad. And people stop complaining about how slow the lifts were. Right? It's like a watch pot never boils, right? If you watch it and it's just doing nothing, you think it's stuck and it's so slow. There's a group policy object called verbose status messages. That's what it used to be called. They've changed the name to now say display highly detailed status messages. I don't know, maybe people didn't understand what the word verbose meant. But that's what it's called now. Same thing. If you had it set before, it would have just automatically renamed it in Windows 8 when you update the ADM templates. Basically, when you log on, it's going through, applying folder redirection, applying drive mappings, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this. Oh, my machine's doing so much stuff. It's so busy. That's great. And my users they're watching these things go by, and all of a sudden they're logged in. Rather than just going, applying settings. Boring, boring. When are you going to be finished? When are you going to be finished? Oh, now you're finished, right? But if it's doing lots of stuff, right, users get the perception that the computer is working faster, all right? And they complain less about how long it takes to log on, all right? Yeah, that's a pretty good setting. I love that setting. I always enable it. And not only that, it helps you understand if there is a slowness with your logging on in your environment, it'll be stuck at that one point. And you can kind of figure it out. So it's some diagnostic information out of it as well. Folder redirection and roaming profiles. All right. Always use folder redirection and roaming profiles. Roaming profiles in XP, people got scared of them. They were very evil, synchronization issues. They didn't redirect them. They got humongous because you didn't redirect the folders. All right. Really recommend that you do both. All right. Because it keeps your roaming profile to a very small size, and your folder redirection I love to enable, and folder redirection still works cross-platform, so your folder redirection will work from XP to 7. Your roaming profile won't because you've got that little V2, but the more you can get into your redirected folders, the better. So that's called user state virtualization, because they love the V word. All right, but add the administrator groups to the folders. Right, there's a setting in there. You go into the group policy setting. I'm not going to show you the setting, but I'll show you the effect if you don't have it applied. You go in. No, I don't, because I blew away my environment. Basically, add the administrator group to the roaming users profiles as administrator template setting. Apply that so you can get access to the users' roaming profiles if you need to look in their files. Otherwise, even as an administrator of the server, you don't have access to those permissions because they created the folder, so they're the owners of the folder, and they exclude the administrator group. All right, pain in the butt. Do it now because it doesn't retrospectively go back and fix that problem. Going back and fixing that problem post is a pain in the butt because people get married. And people change their name when they get married, and it's not just women. I know a man who changed his name to the woman's name when he got married, so it's not just women. I'm not just picking on them, but people change their name when they get married, and their folder is one name and the user account's another name, and it's like, well, what's the username that I need to now re-add? Because if you take ownership of something, you blat the permissions, and you don't know what the permissions were that were applied there. Pain in the butt to manage, get out around for that. Add that. There's also another one, setting up the exclusive use in the folder redirection policy setting itself for the folder redirection. Another really cool one in Windows 7. You can actually upload the roaming profiles registry into user.dat remotely in the background. All right, there's a new setting there. It came out in Windows 7. So if the user never logs off, because users always log off at the end of the day, don't they? Because they love sitting there waiting for their machine to shut down at the end of the day. Don't they? No, they just go Windows L and lock the machine and walk away. And they unlock in the morning, and that way they never see your fantastic verbose status messages in the morning. They just log straight on. But at least you can back up their registry key, their registry settings in the background now if they stay logged on. That's another one. Just look for that. That's the exact name. Home folder. Windows 8 has a new group policy setting called Set Users Home Folder that you can apply to the machine. Woohoo! I never have to update users home folder on the user's account again. Yay! No. Problem with that is it's a machine setting. It's not a user setting. You have to apply it to the machine, which means that if an administrator logs onto that machine, they get a home drive. It kind of sucks, right? I wish it didn't. I wish there was some way you could exclude it, but you can't. But it is really useful for kiosk machines, right, to override the home folder setting. All right, it is really useful maybe for VDI. All right. I still say configure the user's home folder on their account. The good thing about that group policy setting, though, is that when the user logs on, it automatically permissions the folder correctly. It creates the folder, gives them the correct permissions. If you just do a drive mapping and a preference for the user's home folder, it doesn't create the folder. All right? This setting creates the folder, maps the drive. When you set it up on the user account, it creates the folder, and when they log on, it maps the drive through Active Directory user computers. I still prefer to do it that way, and using a %username variable, so you can select all the users in your organisation and just set or in a site or a location, and just set it so all the users' home drives now go to here, all right, or created there, or you have one that has %username%, so you clone that. All right. AGPM, going fast now because I think I'm going over time. AGPM, Advanced Group Policy Management Console. If you have software assurance, fantastic tool that allows you to version control, check in, check out group policy objects, and compare group policy objects with previous versions. All right, it comes free if you have software assurance. You install it on a server, right? It manages group policy, so you then use it. There's an extension to Group Policy Management Console that says, don't talk directly to AD, talk to the AGPM server. You then need to lock down the permissions on all your group policy objects to make sure that no one is now editing those group policy objects directly, because AGPM gets really confused when someone makes a change outside of it. All right? Because it's not doing any magic preventing the change, so you need to do that at a security level. But it's a great tool if you've got lots of group policy objects in your environment and you want to manage group policy objects in your environment in a more way. It also has an approval process, so you can have, I've made a change, can you please approve that? Okay, once it's approved, that change goes live. Pretty cool. All right. Group policy for application deployment, probably not the best way to deploy applications in your environment. It's difficult to schedule. Fixed installation order. Targeting is only via group policy and security filtering, but it's free. So if you haven't got any other way to deploy software in your environment, you might have to do it that way. It's probably good to deploy things like agents, like your SCCM agent or your antivirus agent, or those utility maintenance agents that you want to have deployed everywhere. Kind of use it that way. But if you're going to use it for application deployment, I feel your pain, I've been there before, it's a pain in the butt to get the user to reboot, to get that application installed, because of course they always reboot their machines at the end of each day. No, they don't. And it's really hard to deploy Office 2010. You really can't deploy Office 2010 using group policy, but you can with a script, and I hate scripts. And if you come to my session tomorrow, I'll talk to you about getting rid of logon scripts in your environment. But if you use a script, and there's the article there, you can actually deploy Office using group policy. There's a group policy search engine. If you ever wanted to wonder what that group policy setting was, go to gps.cloudapp.net. All right. Very quickly, this is what it looks like. All right. Remember I talked about verbose. It hasn't been updated for Windows 8 yet. I hit search, my poor laptop, why isn't it responding? But basically this is a search engine that will allow you to search for any Microsoft Office or Windows group policy setting with verbose versus normal status messages. Hit find. Oh look, added support for Windows 8 and Server 2012. I just missed it. Awesome, so it's got Windows 8 and Server 2012 there. So I can look for settings. And there's the information that you'd see if you were in Group Policy Management Console. gps.cloudapp.net. Oh, look at that. It's even got new computer and user icons there. It's been updated. Awesome. I didn't even know that. So if you want to find a setting, rather than going into Group Policy Management Console and trying to find it in an existing group policy template, this is a great way to do it. Very quickly now, VDI. Right, things to do with group policy with VDI. Group policy preferences, disable services. All right, what the heck? Oh, I clicked on the image. All right, do not permission the file system or registry. You want to keep disk I/O low. If you start doing security permissionings to your local C drive on your VDI infrastructure, every 18 hours those VDI machines will go, oh, I want to change all these files and apply all these file permissions. And all of a sudden your VDI infrastructure grinds to a halt because it's doing all this disk I/O, which is of course usually the biggest bottleneck. Use a state redirection for folder redirection, which I mentioned before. Try to disable offline files, disable cache mode. But I want to know more about group policy. I'm glad you asked. There's my website, grouppolicy.biz. I think that's only 3 times I've mentioned it. But grouppolicy.biz. The forums, a link from my website goes to the forums where I'm there. There's a heap of other guys there. And there's this really cool KB article for updates for the group policy in the Windows client and server products. All right, this will be in the slide deck. Take a photo, 3, 2, 1. All right, related content. I've got a log-on script session tomorrow here in this room. Please stop and talk to me. Ask me any questions about group policy. That's my Twitter account and that's my website. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great day.